Good morning on this Sunday, September 7th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. The CDC in chaos as Georgia's 2 U.S. senators call for the resignation of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Also, Georgia House Speaker John Burns is pushing for a property tax cut, and the state marks the first anniversary of the Appalachia High School shooting. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Martha are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Calls grow louder for Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to resign, including from Georgia's U.S. Senators Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. The backlash comes after a series of controversial firings at the Atlanta-based CDC and a major shift in vaccine policy. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is facing growing backlash over his sweeping changes at the CDC from Capitol Hill to the Georgia State Capitol. This week, Kennedy defended firing the CDC director and other top officials, arguing it was necessary to rebuild trust and accountability.
We are the sickest country in the world. That's why we have to fire people at the CDC. They did not do their job.
But in a Senate hearing, Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock pressed Kennedy over the consequences of those shakeups, pointing to a rise in vaccine-preventable diseases.
We're seeing deaths from children from measles. We haven't seen that in 2 decades. We're seeing that under your watch.
Back in Georgia, former CDC officials who resigned in protest joined Democratic lawmakers for a roundtable at the state capitol, raising concerns about vaccine policy, staffing cuts, and last month's deadly shooting at the CDC's DeKalb campus. More than 1,000 current and former HHS employees have now called on Kennedy to resign, but the secretary insists he's staying the course.
How am I a threat?
Senators Ossoff and Warnock both say Secretary Kennedy's actions have eroded public trust in science. So this is a big one. It's a big issue. Martha, I want to start with you this week. The CDC did lose a lot of credibility during the pandemic. I mean, we discussed it several times on these shows. But are the staffing shakeups and the vaccine policy revisions part of restoring accountability, or are we just seeing too much disruption too fast?
Look, I thought it was a very good hearing yesterday. I think you heard questions from Democrats and Republicans. But I just want to remind people, a month ago, our 2 senators voted against the CDC head because they said she was unqualified. Robert Kennedy then a month later agreed with them that she was unqualified and fired her. And now they are on the other side of this issue. So the problem is if it's on the Trump administration, the Democrats are going to oppose it. If it's otherwise, it's going to be out there, okay? But what I'm saying is there are problems at the CDC. There are trust problems at the CDC. And I am willing to let Robert Kennedy reshape this organization because I think nothing's been done in the last 4 years since COVID to reshape this organization. And if all he gets right in his 4 years is that he gets the food safe again, then I will be fine with that.
Theron.
So 3 things I want to touch on. One is to Martha's point. The 2 U.S. senators voted against the pick because they did point out some things that she lacked, right? But the person that he's replacing her with is way less qualified than he is. And so what this seems to me, Lori, is that this is all about Trump and his people putting on folks who are loyal to them. So the senators are standing on business when they say, hey, we voted against her, and it's not about him removing her. Senator Warnock and Senator Ossoff had concerns about how the CDC was being managed months before. And the other thing that is very interesting to me is that we have to remind ourselves, RFK Jr. is a Trump loyalist, and we know where he stands. He's been against vaccines for decades. He's on the record for questioning vaccines. He's even said that it led to ADHD and autism and all that. What is different, though, Lori, is that they put someone in there that doesn't have the scientific or scientist experience, the health experience. And he also is just a lawyer, but he doesn't bring that to the table. So we can say, okay, you know what? Maybe he's okay with that. Trump trusts him. But what he also has not been able to do is run a department. That's the problem. When you get a cabinet level position, you got to be able to run a department. And when you have staff members questioning your competency, questioning your ability to lead them, and he also, one points I want to make. RF Kennedy said on record that he was not going to tamper with the expert-led advisory committee on immunization practices. He's doing exactly against what he said he was going to do. He went in there and fired those 7 people. And the last thing he said, he promised at the Senate hearing, is that he was not going to come in and be oppose an obstructionist when it comes to vaccines.
Phil, over to you, because I mean, there were a lot of Republicans who did question the vaccines, right? And so, I mean, this is a Republican issue.
Well, I like the questioning from the Republicans especially, and they asked him some tough questions. What is offensive is Warnock and most of the Democrats, not all, insulted Kennedy. They just made speeches that he wasn't allowed to answer, which I think the American people deserve good answers. At least the Republicans elicited some really good answers. No, Theron, he said that he's for tested vaccines. That's the myth that the Democrats are promoting. But he also said that he, as opposed to the mandates, which a lot of the Democrats and some Republicans were for. I thought it was a very informational hearing, but I thought a lot of this was performance art. Warnock was particularly rude, and I thought, Martha, you made a very good point. The hypocrisy was incredible. And if you don't like somebody when you take over a company, you fire them. I mean, one of the people that was fired last week, one of the leading people at the CDC, was a trans promoter. The vast majority of the American people don't want people like that in charge. And Kennedy made a really good point, which is a shocker that should cut across all ideological lines, and that is that 70% of the American people have a chronic disease. And he said when his uncle was president, JFK, it was only 11%. That ought to shake up everybody in terms of we need new leadership at the CDC. Biden's guy, Xavier Becerra, was a DEI hire who did nothing for 4 years, and even some Democrats said he was incompetent. So RFK, he has some flaws, yes. He needs to answer questions, yes. But he is turning around a department that was in chaos and trying to straighten it out.
Melita, what is the best way for Democrats to fight back here? Because some moderates like what he's doing in some issues, including food dyes, harmful chemicals in some of the foods that we're eating. I mean, that's an issue that touches on the suburban moms that are crucial for votes.
Well, food safety is completely separate from these vaccination issues. And the vaccination issues are COVID vaccines are all of a sudden, because he dismissed the review board that was to approve those vaccines, it's very difficult for people, even people over 65 and 70, to get a COVID vaccine of the latest iteration in Atlanta right now and all over the country. You have states, because he is such an opponent of vaccinations like measles, mumps, and rubella, you have Florida just saying that they will no longer mandate those vaccinations. So I agree with Senator Warnock's very forceful judgment that Robert Kennedy Jr. is a hazard to the health of the American people. And even this morning, as we tape on Friday morning, more and more Republicans were joining the Democrats who were calling for Kennedy to resign. Medicine and science have a scientific basis. And RFK Jr. has a way of ignoring the science behind the medical recommendations and going off into some pseudoscience that is not based in fact.
I just want to say one quick thing. The biggest problem he had with those folks that he ended up firing is that he asked for this data, this vaccine data that they were using to make these decisions to review. If he's the head of the department and he asked for data from people that work for him to verify decisions that they made, he should be able to get that. So bottom line is, if in any other situation, being fired for that reason would be for cause. Let me
ask you this, since we're on this vaccine issue, and you have babies, younger kids, it is unnerving when you're holding your 25-pound baby, 30-pound baby, and the nurse walks in and she's got trays full of 4 vaccines, and you know, some of them are 2 vaccines and 1 shot. It is unnerving, and you know, people are skeptical about vaccines now after COVID, and I feel like everybody's kind of melding this all together. Well,
one thing I want to also remind our viewers, Lori, is that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said about the fired CDC director that she was unimpeachable. He defended her. He pushed when they were raised questions. So I want to make sure that, yes, he fired her when she told him no to something he asked her to do, and that happens. We all run businesses.
And she also leaked information.
And she also, but this was his pick. This was his person, right?
Well,
and I come from
everybody can make a mistake.
No, but I come from the business, and it's kind of like the streets, right? If you vouch for this person, if he or she messes up, you have to own it, right? So my point is, he's got to own the fact that he actually pushed her out there. Now let me ask the question about that. As parents, you have to really consult with your doctors on a lot of things, but particularly now, when I have a 2 and a 5-year-old, yes, Lori, I remember very vividly Tyson and now Tatum getting those shots. I'm married to a physician. My wife is a doctor. She's a dermatologist. We ask questions. I think a lot more parents have been doing that for a very long time. Look, I come from a community where my mother, my grandparents, they didn't like to let doctors just open up and have surgeries on them and give them a lot of medicine because they had questions. So I think that the fact that we're missing here is that, yes, parents can have concerns, but you have to follow the science. And the science shows that we have to take the vaccines. Now, what physicians have got to do is understand that there are questions and be more open and transparent and public about what's in these vaccines.
But I don't
No, wait a minute.
understand
Let me just say this. The science doesn't say you always have to take the vaccines.
I didn't say you have to always do that.
Okay, good. I wanted to clarify.
But I do think that we are a country that has been living off these vaccines for centuries.
Well, I'm going to go along with what's being said here because the Biden CDC was totally wrong, especially with young children. And this was RFK's point. We cannot just be mandating willy-nilly like we've done in the past. That was a huge mistake with regard to our young children. And so I think that you make a very good point. You're presented with all of these vaccines, and go to your doctor and talk to about it. Do some research. Just don't take the advice of, in this case, the old CDC. The old CDC was wrong.
Well, there's a couple of provisions. I think it's religion, belief, and something else. So the parents do have the option to opt out of a mandated vaccine.
Well, a lot of people didn't have the option, especially military people who were fired by the Biden administration for not taking the vaccine. Totally wrong.
Okay, quickly, Melita.
Well, the other thing that came up in some of these press conferences is the mood at the CDC and how the employees who are still there feel ignored, particularly after the violent shootings at that building. And I just want to say that I think we should all, as Atlantans, have pride in the work of the CDC and the workers there who are devoted to public health and public safety.
I think we can leave it
I
all
think we
there.
all agree on that.
We'll leave it there then. Coming up, House Speaker John Burns is pitching tax relief, this one for homeowners. We'll discuss next.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
According to the AJC, Georgia House Speaker John Burns is eyeing property tax relief for the upcoming legislative session. He's previewed a proposal to cut property taxes for homeowners, even as he signals continued support for a gradual reduction in the state income tax. A recent poll suggests many Georgians would back increased sales taxes if it meant lower property tax bills. Melita, can we afford to do both a property tax cut and an income tax cut?
Well, this needs to be thoroughly studied because property taxes are levied at the local level. They fund local programs like city, county governments and schools and local law enforcement. So for state lawmakers to not have a solution for how those local services would be provided is a little bit premature to start selling something that you don't have a solution for replacement of that revenue.
Phil, where does that extra money come from?
Well, obviously, in the Republican Party has been very aggressive on this over the years, is you need to foster revenue, more revenue growth. And I would hope a lot of Democrats would agree with that because it helps all of us. The Republican Party is known for holding the line on taxes and also for, and I think we ought to emphasize on the state income tax, the Republicans say this is a gradual thing. I think even the Lieutenant Governor, Burt Jones, said, it could take 7, 8 years, and you have to watch how the economy is going. Nothing wrong with the state legislature, and they've done this in the past, capping the millage rate that counties can go for. Otherwise, some of these counties, I remember Lori and Richmond County, they just kept raising the millage rate to outrageous rates, and that's what forced the legislature to say, no, you're going to have a cap on at least 21 mills to stop these big spending Democrats. So now we have to look at the fine print of what this legislation is going to be. I do agree with that. But property tax relief, that's a popular topic.
Well, real quick, it's all about the tax code, right? And does it work in its current form? And if we were to change it, who does it benefit? Democrats, we believe that you should start from the bottom up. Let's cut taxes for working class Georgians. people who are poor, who are out here trying to make ends meet. And what also happened is that you got Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones said he'll eliminate the state income tax. You got a Lieutenant Governor candidate who would support that as well. Now the Speaker comes back and says, all right, well, we're not totally there yet. So there are some House Republicans that don't think we should eliminate the state income tax. But then you had Democrat Michael Thurmond coming in this week and say, hey, I think we need to eliminate the state income taxes on tips and overtime. And so now that's another sort of caveat to this whole conversation. But I think ultimately it's going to be debated in this session. But what Thurmond did this week, I think, was important because Democrats, quite frankly, hadn't had an answer to this. All we're saying is that it's just going to, hurt us to try to find revenue.
So are you in favor of property tax relief?
We're all in favor of property tax relief, but I don't want to take away that, because it's being done in DeKalb and places like that now. They pass the e-host, you take property tax relief, and it gets there because you take the sales tax revenue that's generated from the sales tax, and that's how you get a relief to the counties. That's something that I'm sure that Burns and others are going to look at. What is working across the state now, and how can they support it at the state legislature?
So I think we're forgetting one thing here, though, is that we have this new piece of legislation that's rolling out all over the state of this 3% cap and all of the 533, I think is what it was.
Right.
And there's a lot of areas that are having trouble with that. Okay, so I think that we've got to make sure we've got that straight. And then I certainly want to look at property tax reduction, but I got to tell you, I've probably done 10 interviews on that new property tax rule, and even with the people that are implementing it, and there's still a lot of questions about it.
Still a lot of confusion.
A lot of confusion. So I say hooray for any kind of tax cut, but you got to make sure we got all the pieces in place.
All right, let's move on. Calls are growing louder to ditch electronic voting machines and bring back hand-marked paper ballots, at least in a test run. Two influential Republican lawmakers in Georgia are urging Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to pilot paper ballots in select counties this fall, saying voters deserve alternatives to QR-coded ballots, but Raffensperger is pushing back. Phil.
Well, I think Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is totally wrong on this. What is wrong with the pilot project? This is a backup to have hand-marked paper ballots. We have that already. So if you're testing the main Dominion machines or trying to see if the patches are okay, that's what's wrong with it. In fact, Raffensperger himself is a hypocrite. He actually ordered test pilot programs even just 2 years ago on the patchwork and all of that on the Dominion system. There's nothing wrong with a pilot program. It's not against state law. He's totally wrong about that. He's twisted the meaning of the state law that you can test these systems. We have an important election coming up with the Public Service Commission. Why not test now, or at least have a test before the May primary?
Melita?
Well, I'm for figuring out how we eliminate the QR code between the voter casting a ballot and the machine which counts the ballot or scans the ballot. So whatever it takes to make sure that the QR code can't be hacked by a smart computer operator is what I'm in favor of.
I agree with that.
Martha?
I would like to see the timing different on this. Okay, we're coming up on a big election. I think your idea about the PSC might be a good one. I don't want to see us going into this legislative session with qualifying and then a primary and then a general with a lot of changes to how we do things. If we're going to change how we do things in a midterm election or a presidential election, we need to do it in that odd numbered year. We should have done it this year for the 26th election, not in the 26th legislative session. I think it makes it confusing for the people working at the polls. It makes it confusing. We don't need to have that.
The PSC would be a good test.
It would be a good test, and I think that timing-wise, if we'd done it this last session, it would have been better.
I agree with Martha. Look, there was a robust debate in the legislative session this past year, Senate Bill 214. This was a bill that would require voters to bubble in their choices in the polling places. It passed the Senate, it didn't pass the House. I think we got to expect that to come back up this year.
All right. Thanks, folks. Coming up 1 year after Georgia's deadliest school shooting, lawmakers clash on guns but unite on mental health.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
1 year after the deadliest school shooting in Georgia history, state leaders are reflecting but not retreating from their political positions. At the state capitol, lawmakers marked the solemn anniversary with renewed calls for change on both sides of the aisle. While there was bipartisan agreement on the need for more mental health support for students, the sharp divide on gun policy remains. Theron?
You know, it's one of these things, Lori. it gets to me because, we've been talking about Appalachia High School for a long time, and it's been a year. And so it's one of these things where it can't be just both sides have good points. That's what a lot of Democrats and Republicans are saying. And a lot of elected officials, they always fall back on the whole, well, it's mental illness. We need to do more for mental health. Yes, we've been needing to do something for mental health for a very long time. But where I'm going with this is responsible gun ownership. We didn't talk about it on last week's show because, Phil and all of us like to talk about local issues, but let's not gloss over the fact that you had a person who took a gun in Minneapolis and went and shot innocent kids who were there praying. And we just moved on. Now we're talking about vaccines. Now we're talking about hand paper ballots. So I just think that we got to do more to make sure that we promote responsible gun ownership, gun safety. We also saw here where the person who killed David Rose broke into his parents' safe and took the guns and shot off 500 rounds. And so condolences still go out to the family. I'm glad to see that these people were memorializing the victims who we lost, but I still think we got a long way to go in this country when we talk about combining the two, mental illness and responsible gun ownership.
Phil, is that where there's some compromise? Is the safe storage of guns?
Yes, and I partially agree with you. I do think that we have to do more in terms of responsibility, but without infringing, of course, on the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms. But I do think the mental health aspect is certainly where we can compromise. We have now laws where we're sharing information between school districts on if there's a problem. I will say this: in Minneapolis, and Minnesota, they have the toughest gun control laws in the nation. They have red flag laws. That didn't stop a shooting. So it's not just about, and plus, if you're supporting the Trump administration and trying to get criminals and gangs rounded up, they are collecting the guns. I think Democrats ought to be happy. Look at the guns in Washington, D.C. that have been confiscated just because of that sweep. So more law and order, but yes, mental health, I think we can all disagree on in trying to get that done in school systems.
Melita.
We are the only country in the world where these kinds of frequent mass shootings happen, and we need to do better, and we need to find a way to work across the aisle and find the safe gun storage and the red flag and the various ways that other countries have adapted to prevent the kinds of problems we see in this country.
Well, I mean, look, they may not have the shootings that we have. Half the shootings in America, though, are suicides, okay, of the number that happens every year. But I will say a lot of knifings and things like that happen in other countries. That's why the mental health portion of it and the safe storage part is important, because we can't allow we've got to be able to say you can't have a gun because of your mental health status. We're not quite there yet on what the parameters are for that. We now have these series, you brought up the shooting in Minneapolis, these series of shootings with transgender perpetrators that are targeting religious schools. And so DSM-5 took that out as a mental health problem, but clearly there's a mental health problem there. So we've got to be able to deal with those issues.
Real quick, Lori, I got to get this in. We know Chief Darren Sherbon watches this show, so I got to push back a little bit on you, Phil. Before that sweep, which I think is unnecessary with Trump, you had the city of Atlanta, led by Chief Sherbon and Mayor Andre Dickens, taking a lot of guns off the streets too. So that's been a big component.
So why are you against Trump doing it, but Chief Sherbon doing it?
No, I wasn't against Trump's doing it. I just want to give the chief and Atlanta folks credit for doing it before y'all give Trump all the credit for bringing in these raids. But the other thing I want to say real quick is the fact that this conversation is civil. It's really the one thing that I think that all Democrats, libertarians, independents, MAGA supporters, progressives can generate around, because we all want our kids to come home alive, and we want them to come safe. I agree, Martha. I think you made a good point about Minnesota, more gun laws, but we also got to deal with that there's a lot of hate in this country. Yeah. There's a lot of hate in this country, guys. And you look at the folks who are getting these guns and who they're shooting and killing, it's usually derived by a lot of propaganda about things that they believe that is going on. So therefore they take a gun, whether it's locked up or not, and they go and kill innocent kids. That's where we got to really be honest about this problem we're facing.
Absolutely agree. We'll leave it there. Coming up, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
All right, Melita, we'll start with you.
Thanks. I don't always acknowledge the fans I meet for the show, but I'm taking an exception to acknowledge Sylvia Dickens, the mayor's mother, who I met at a baby shower last weekend. It's very clear where the mayor gets his charismatic personality. She is just delightful.
Lots of circles, huh?
Well, I got a winner, and you'll appreciate this, I think, Melita. It's Leah Ward-Sears, who's the president of Emory University. They got rid of their DEI program the other day, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Equity is the big problem, and she is an intellectually honest liberal. I haven't always agreed with her, but she said, we're committed now to fairness and opportunity. I think that was great. Thank you, Leah Ward-Sears. Also winner, Croy. It's a great Marietta-based company. It's engineering and consulting company founded by my friend Jim Croy. Greg Teague is the CEO now. They're doing a great job. They're a powerhouse in the industry. So congratulations to Croy on the 20th anniversary.
All right, Theron.
All right, message to the Atlanta Falcons. This has got to be a better year. Guys, Lori, the Steelers fans over here always beats me up, but no, I'm really feeling good about this season. So shout out to them, a good season ahead of them. And also the Savannah Bananas. If you guys never looked this up, this is a very funny baseball team that's going to be expanding in Savannah. We are the Georgia Gang, so let's get out of Atlanta, but they're going to be expanding to a new modern training facility.
I just want, many of us have worked with Claire Bartlett over the years. She is the executive director of the Georgia Life Alliance. And 2 weeks ago, her husband noticed she was not walking right and took her immediately to the emergency room, and they found a brain tumor, and she was operated on. She's in rehab now, so I say, Claire, do the hard work. We're so happy that you're doing better, but please remember her in your thoughts and prayers.
We're praying for her. Everyone, make it a great week.